Okay. So yesterday we were doing about the PyTest, that how actually we can run our test cases from different places and different ways, right? But I was not getting the option in my IDE to run the test cases from here. So there is one thing that we need to update in our PyCharm IDE as well. In PyCharm, by default, the test runner. There are another frameworks as well like PyTest. There is unit test, nose test. Likewise, there are another frameworks also available. So by default, the test runner in PyCharm is unit test. We are working with PyTest, so we have to change that as well. Right. So what you need to do is you just need to go to File, Settings. In the Tools, you'll get an option of Python Integrated Tools. And in here you will get an section of testing. Default test runner you can see over here. You need to change it to PyTest. By default you will find it unit test. Once you change it, you can apply the change and click OK. And then after, you can run your test cases from here from your IDE as well. Like if I just right click over my module, my file name, I get the option over here, run PyTest in demo 1, the module name. So here also I get the same output. It collected the item. It skipped the test case, reason being there is only one test case over here on which I have marked it as that we need to skip the test case. And second test case is not following the convention, because of which it's not collected here as well. If I change the name from here, test underscore a prefix, and then I run it, then it will collect two test cases. Okay. Test demo, test dummy, test dummy 1. Okay. I'll just will again do the configuration. I'll run it again. Run PyTest. What's wrong? Batch day 3, test demo 1, test dummy. Let me just remove this annotation for the time. I don't know why it's behaving like this. Okay, I am changing in test demo 2 and I'm expecting the change in test demo 1. Sorry, I'm so sorry. So now if I see, there will be two test cases collected. One will open the browser and navigate me to Google, and second one will have a print statement along like this. Right. This way we can run the test cases from here from our IDE as well. Okay. Now there are many things that we can do with the PyTest. We can group the test cases, we can parameterize the test case. But right now, what we are going to start with is parameterizing the test case. For grouping the test case, there is simple annotation like this. You just need to give the name of your test case, the group name that you want to have. You just need to give that. Like I would say, I want to put this test dummy 1 under the group 1, let's say. Group 1 I want to put it inside. So I'll say PyTest dot mark dot followed by the name of your group name that you want to give. So I'll say 1. That's it. So now this is under my group 1, and if I want I can put it into same group or different group. I can do anything over here, but usually grouping the test cases does not come in use that much, so that's why it's not into use, but you can if you want to. Okay, next, which is important, how to parameterize the test case, right? And why is it that important that we are discussing it over here? So over here, if I'll just make one more module, package day 4, and inside this, let's name it as um, parameterize. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make multiple test cases in which I'm just going to add a few numbers. Okay, that is what I'm going to do. So what I'll do is I'll make the test case. I'll say def test underscore sum1, and then inside this I'll just will have two variables, a is equals to 10, b is equals to 20, and I will return the a plus b, or I'll print the total of these like this. Right, this is one of my test case. If I run this, I get an output over here 30. Right, likewise if I want to do it with multiple arguments, multiple numbers I want to check for, so what I can do is I can make multiple test cases likewise. Right, but over here what is actually happening, the logic is same, the test case name will change a little. If you just give me 5 minutes, there's someone, just 5 minutes. Okay, yeah. Okay, so okay, just let me see. Hello, so you're joining the first class today? Okay, so what we are doing right now is that in the previous classes we have done some important installations, and right now we are working with the PyTest, which is basically a framework to test, to make the test cases and run them. That is what I'm doing. I'll request you to please go through the last 3 videos of the trial class so that you can catch up from here. Okay? Till the time what I'm starting, that I'll tell. Okay? See, Python is something that I cannot take on with the batch, but yes, where the concepts need some understanding, that I'll surely will cover. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So coming back to the thing, that what we are right now doing, you can see on the screen that I am just putting the same logic. Just the name of the test case I can change. I can change the argument values to something else, and I can print the value, print the total of these two arguments at what comes out to be. But this basically is a repetition. Plus, it's increasing the amount of test cases that I'm making, and it's not even of our use as well. Right. So, just to avoid this, sometimes what happens is that we have test cases and we do need to have a requirement to run it on different browsers. Right. So, at that time, what we can do? We cannot write the same test case and change the browser name. Right. So what we do is, instead of writing it like this, we parameterize the test case with the values I want to change. Right now what my requirement says that I want to change these two values only to get different outputs. Right. In the real test cases, I would like to maybe change the browser name. So that I will parameterize. How to do that? Let's see that now. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a simple normal Python function which will do the same functionality, addition of two numbers. Let's say def, and I'll say add. To this add function I can either pass arguments. I can just say that there are two arguments which I can pass, or I can do it the same way that I was doing, like a is equals to this, or let's say pass the arguments. Let's don't hard code the value. I'll pass two variables over here, a and b. Whenever I'll call this function, I'll put on the values, and in here I'll just will return the sum of a plus b. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then I'll make one test case which I'm going to parameterize. So I'll say test calculate, right? And in here in this test case I will be calling this function that I have made above, that is add. And what actually I need to pass over here, I need to pass on values. Two values I need to pass, a and b, that we need to pass. Now I need to print them. So it's returning the value, so I'm printing it for the time. Now coming to the annotation, that how to do that. So there is an annotation, simple way which we were using earlier, pytest dot mark dot, I need to import this pytest over here, so let's just import this first. Okay, it's done. Then I'll say parameterize. Here it comes. Right. Now to this annotation we pass two things. First is the thing that we are going to pass to the test case, the values. Right. We are going to take two values and we are going to pass it on, and same will be coming up over here. Right. Now you can see the error has gone. This annotation has informed that this test case will accept two values, a and b. Now coming to the values to it. So there are different data structures that is supported by Python. Tuple is what we are going to use over here. For brief discussion about the data structures, you can just go on and watch the pre-recorded videos. You will find each and every detail about the data structures, how they are dynamic and how they are going to work. Okay. Now in here, in the brackets, I will pass the different arguments. Like you can see, I'm just adding these. These will be the number of data I will be passing on. So in my first set, let's say I want to pass 5 and 9. Then I want to pass 8 and something like this. Right. Likewise, and last. Right. This way we have got our list. We have got these arguments which I want to check for this add function. I'm not passing it anywhere. I'm not repeating the function anywhere. I'm just passing the values over here in the annotation. So let's just comment all these functions over here. Now I'll save this. And run it. So over here you can see that my 5 test cases have been passed over here. Just by passing different arguments in the same test case, by parameterizing it, my test cases got separated with different values and my test cases are passed like this. Got this? Sure. Hmm. 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 Yes. Not basically a test case, but a value that we are passing to the test case. We only have one test case. Yeah. Okay. Because if I did like this, what's it going to do? Doing the same thing. Just my work has been increased, my space has been occupied a lot, plus I'm repeating everything, which I don't want. So this is what is very important, because while we are going to work with the frameworks with some different test cases, at that time I may have to check my test case on different platforms. So at that time I will not make the test cases again and again. I'll just will parameterize it like this. I'll pass on the values and it will automatically accept different parameter as a test case value. Okay, this is what is important to know about parameterizing the test case. Likewise, like over here, you can see that these values are coming up, and whatever the addition, whatever the total is, that's coming up over here. But what if a wrong value has been passed and I want to compare it, that okay, fine. If 8 plus 5 is 13, I know. But suppose I am giving some condition on which I want to compare it, that is 8 plus 5 is equals to 15. Negative test cases comes as well. Right. Then what we are going to do? Then how it's going to result? How our parameterizing test case is going to work out? So for that we have a keyword. We have a keyword that is assert keyword. Now what this assert keyword is basically going to do, it's going to compare it's going to compare the actual value which is going to come from the test case after addition, like 8 plus 5 is 13, I know it's the actual value. It's going to compare it with the expected value which is given to me so that I can compare. That is what I need to do. If this keyword is also very useful, this is going to come in use when we are going to work with the test cases. So let's just see how it's going to work and how it actually results. Right. So now I am going to expect one more parameter over here. I'm going to expect one more parameter over here, which will be output, which I'm going to pass, which is the expected value. I'm going to compare it with. That is going to come up over here, and that will come output. In the test cases I'm expecting it. And then I'll say this is printing, then I'll just will put it into a variable to get my actual value, add a comma b. So I'll say this compare result with output. Output is going to come up from these data sets. So one parameter will be added over here, one more value will come up over here. 9 plus 5, let's say I'm giving some wrong value over here, this, and then this is 12. Okay, so I have given two wrong expected values. Let's see how our assert keyword is going to result on this. So I'll save this and I'll run this. So what I get is I get some failed test cases as well. Which test case has been failed? What was the value that was there in the test case? That's been captured over here. This was the data set 5, 9 and 15. How is it failed? Why is it failed? This is my actual result. This is what I'm expecting to come. So this is coming up over here, actual, expected, and in here it's giving me the detail. Assert keyword throws an assertion error, so that's why the test case has been failed over here. Rest case, there was one also second value I have given wrong, which was 2, 2, 9 and 12. That is also not the right value, so that is also a failed test case over here. And the rest of the test cases are coming up over here. which are failed. So if I see the final output, I will get 2 passed, 2 failed, 3 passed. Okay, got the use of assert keyword, how it works, how it throws the error, how it fails the test case. That also has came up over here, but since we have not been printing the values in that particular manner, so that's not clear enough over here. So if I just go on, if I want to see the print statement, I'm adding it, right? So what I need to do is will go over here in the edit configurations. I told you yesterday that if I want to see some print statements, some standard outputs in my console, then I have to add a marker which is -s to see the print statements. To do the same thing in our IDE, what we need to do is in our configuration which has been made, in the additional arguments, I will add -s like this. I'll apply, OK, I'll save it, I'll run it. So in here, I will get the details like this. Over here it's coming, or more precise we can do over here as well, but right now I'm not concerned in printing the statements. That we can do later on as well. Most important was to make you understand the concept of assert keyword and parameterizing the test case, which I am hope is clear enough. Yeah, yeah, if I want to compare the, yeah. Hmm. 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 No, see, actual value is going to come up from the function you are performing. Like suppose I'm on some URL, I'm on some website, it has some title, right? That title is there on the web page. I can get that title easily from the Selenium command. What I am expecting, that I need to see that whether I want to give title 1, title 2. Likewise I can do. But actual result you're going to get from the commands itself. Like I have given over here a plus b. That's going to give me the value, right? Yeah. Hmm. No issues. You just do it by yourself. We have videos, pre-recorded videos on PyTest framework as well. Might be right now some of the things may not make more sense to you since you are the very first class you are joining today. So you just go through the pre-recorded videos and see then once. The assert keyword is completely explained there with detail, with usage, and exceptionally it's introduced. Okay. Still, if you don't understand, then I'm here to tell you. You can ask me anytime. On the website. Over here, when you'll go to this website, over here there is this, starting from this, what is PyTest, till this last, customizing LO reports. This is whole information about the PyTest framework. Okay. We, yes, once you go through that, if you face any issue, then I'll just will complete that. Okay. Okay. So now is what is more important to start with the PyTest. Attaching the reports and attaching the screenshot, that's a standard command that we can cover on later on as well when we are going with the frameworks. It's just a one line command. So that's what I'm not going to cover right now. We'll do it when we'll be actually making the reports of some of the test case, some real test case, and that time I'll show you the report generation. Okay. Now we have seen through our Selenium commands that how we can open up different browsers, how we can navigate to some URL, some website I can open using the commands. Right. Now after that, what after that? We want to automate the test case. To automate the browser, what is the main thing? I need to interact with the pages that is there on the website. How will I be able to interact with these pages? By interacting the elements that are over here, right? If I want to click somewhere, I need to interact with that element. I need to know what that element is, and then I have to extract it and use it, right? Now how to do that? For that there is a full explanation that we are going to cover, that what are the types of elements that we see on the web page, how we can identify them, everything we are going to do. We are going to take the example of this website only, selenium.com. Okay, now over here on this site you can see that I have an image as well over here. This is a logo, this is a link that is coming up over here, this is a button, this is just a text which is informing me that this portal is for Selenium, Python and C# training. Likewise, I have image over here, then I have static text over here, I have text box to contact the administrator. Likewise, I have number of elements over here. Now how to identify different elements over here? So on every URL, on every website that you see, there are generally some common elements that you will encounter, right? Which are those? Let's talk about them. I'm going to have a tabular form over here to talk about one by one about all the elements. Okay, so objects. Which objects or elements do we face? There is simple text on the web page. There is text box on the web page. Then I have link, button, radio button, checkbox, then image, then drop downs comes. Right, these are some of the elements that we see. Now, how to identify them differently? Let's talk about the text box first. Okay, whenever we fire some of the request to navigate to some URL, the server along with the web page, it returns me the HTML page, the HTML tags. What HTML tags are, how to see that HTML tags. So if I right click on any of the web page, I just right click anywhere, I get the option of view page source. So this is the page source that we get. What is this page source? These all are the HTML tags. The tags you can see over here in the purplish tag, these are the tags. Now if I just go down a little, over here, let's start from here. Right, now over here, as I said, in the purplish tag we have the tag names given. Along with that we have something written in the orangish tag. What that orangish tag is, that the attribute, that is the identification by which I can identify the particular element on the web page. So suppose I just want to go and look for this text box. I just want to look for this text box, that what's the page source of this. So I'll right click on this text box specifically, and in here I get the option of inspect. If I click on inspect, this kind of screen I'm going to get, this navigation screen, inspecting screen, and the highlighted part you can see over here, that it automatically highlighted something over here. This is the page source for this particular text box. And what actually it has a tag name, it has some attribute, some values given. Likewise, using these attributes and values, I can identify this text box. The tag name is going to be the constant for all the tags which we are, for all the objects which we are going to see, right? So for text box we have the tag input. So if I'll say over here, the tag name is input. Then Taking it further, whenever we talk about the attributes and the values, attributes are of two types. One is the mandatory attributes. Whatsoever will happen, that particular attribute will always be there with the element. Right. So if I see over here in this highlighted part, which is my mandatory attribute, that is the type. Because there are going to be a number of objects which have the tag name input. How to identify it differently for button? Button may also have an input tag. We'll see what button has a tag name as, but how to differentiate it by the mandatory attribute, and what that is, type, which is equals to, along with the value we are going to calculate it, type is equals to text. So this will differentiate the text box from another element by these two important tags, input and the type attribute. Mandatory attribute, and we also have optional attribute as well. Optional attributes we will continue once we are done with the mandatory attributes. At that time we will see, because optional attributes are same for all the objects. They can have 0 or more, 0 or all the optional attributes. For that we'll come in some time, not right now. This is why, this is how I can identify a text box on the web page. If it has input tag and the type attribute, then it's a text box. I will send some data. Then what next I may have? Then may have I button. So if I talk about the button, let's say this is the button I want to look for, contact us. So I'll inspect it, I'll click on that button, inspect, and the page source will be highlighted for this particular element only, like this. Now over here, the tag name over here for button is used as button itself. What's the tag name used? Button. But buttons can also have input tag as well. Both tag names can be used for a button. Okay, but the mandatory attribute is going to be type, whose value will be submit. Okay, submit or button, both can be there, but usually you will find the type of a button as submit. Okay, then we have radio buttons. Now over here on this page I don't have any radio button, so let's take some another page to see. Let's say facebook.com. Okay, I'll go to this create new account, and over here I have the radio button. Right, now if I inspect this radio button, what do I get? The tag name and the information about it. This is basically the tag. This is basically the radio button information. That is the name given to the name of the radio button. That it is a female option of the radio button. Then it will be a male. So that's something else. This is the radio button. And what tag it has? Anyone? Input. And what's the mandatory attribute? Type is equals to radio. Yeah. So we can see over here, type is equals to radio. Same way is with the checkboxes. Now over here also I don't have the checkbox, so I'll take another site to see, rediff.com. Here is the checkbox. So I'll inspect this checkbox only, where I click to check it or uncheck it. So here only I'll click, I'll inspect, and this is the page source highlighted for the checkbox. So what is the tag name and the mandatory attribute? Yes. The tag name will be input. Yes, there can be. But right now what we are concerned about is identifying different elements. Because till now we have encountered three elements which have same tag name, input. How to differentiate them? By using the mandatory attribute. Right. If we have multiple input tags as well for the checkbox, that I can identify using the optional attribute as well. That's not an issue. But I should know it's a checkbox. Right. So, what's the mandatory attribute for checkbox? It is checkbox. Then comes up, then I have image, drop down, link and text. Now image is different from all the elements that we have done so far. Image is different from all. How is it different? Let's see. If I go up over here and I look for some image, let's say this image I only want to look. So I'll inspect it. What I get over here? The highlighted part. This is the highlighted part for the image. What's the tag name for the image? Yes, it's not an input tag. What's the tag name? What's the color of the tag name that is available in the page source? The purplish one. Right. So for image, the tag name is img. That's different. img, and the mandatory attribute is src, source. And what this source basically is going to have, this is going to have the address of the location from where the image is being loaded. That link is going to come up over here as right now it's being displayed the same way. Right. So the mandatory attribute is src. The same way we have another attribute, that is link. Link is also different from another elements, but it's kind of same to the image. It also have same kind of mandatory attribute, like this is the link that I have. If I inspect it, this is being highlighted over here. So what's the tag name for a link that is being coming up over here? A. A or anchor, you can say anything for this. A, anchor, both are going to work. And the mandatory attribute href, exactly. href is the mandatory attribute. Now what this href is going to hold? It's going to hold the link of the page where I will be routed after clicking on the link. At that link is going to be captured over here. Okay, so that's why image and link are different from others, and that's why they have the mandatory attributes different and the tag names also different. Okay, now we are left with drop down. Now drop down is also different. It's very important to understand that how drop down is different. So if I just show you a drop down over here, this is the drop down which is having the countries being captured over here, right? So if I inspect this, this is what has been highlighted over here, and inside this tag, inside this page source, there are options coming up. Option, what is the value with that? Please select country. This is the default value of the drop down. Then in the second, in the option 1, I have the name of my country. Option 2, second name of country. Likewise, I have the whole list of the countries which are listed in the drop down. But how is it different from the another elements? Firstly, the tag name is different. Select. This select tag is very important to understand, because on pages, on many of the websites, you will see custom drop downs. Custom drop down means that they will look like a drop down, but they will not be a drop down. The identification of drop down is that only it will have select tag. if you see any of the drop down on the page and it does not have select tag, it's not a drop down. I'll show you over here on this page as well. We have seen the drop down below, right? Over here also I have the same kind of structure, just the options are lesser, right? I just have three options over here. So if I inspect this, what I get, it's a link that I'm getting. It does not have any of the drop down, any of the select tag anywhere. So it's not a drop down, it's just a custom drop down which is made in the form of that. Okay, so it's very important to know the difference between the custom drop downs and a drop down. Okay, since select tag is specifically for drop downs, it does not have any mandatory attribute, it does not require any mandatory attribute, so it is not applicable over here. Then comes up text. Now text is very dynamic. When I say dynamic, you can use any tag with for the text on the page, right? Like this is contact us. This is a static text. It's not being clicked anywhere. This is not a button. This is not an image. Nothing. It's just a text. So if I inspect this text over here, it's being written in the p tag, which is a paragraph tag basically. Likewise, there is more text below. If I inspect this as well, it's also inside a p tag, right? If I look for more, let's say I want to look for this testimonial, it's inside a div tag, div tag. So text is very dynamic. You cannot bound it to any particular tag name. You can use any tag name. There can be a number of tags you can use, like p tag, div tag, label, I, h. Now h varies from h1 to h6, that's heading tag. Then we have more of the tags. We cannot bound it to any limit. It can be used. Okay, so this is basically what the object identification will be like. Now you are able to understand what I wanted to tell you about object identification, right? Now if you see any element on the page, you will be able to inspect it, that okay fine, this is a text box, it will have an input tag and the type mandatory attribute will be type text, right? Then coming to optional attribute, as I said, optional attributes are such that any element can have 0 or all the optional attributes. There are mainly three optional attributes: id, name and class. These are the optional three attributes which you will mainly find with the elements. Now element can have 0 or 3 of the optional attributes, right? Now if I see for any optional attribute, like you can see over here, this text that we have looked for, testimonial, it was in a div tag and it has an optional attribute id, which is given some value. It also have another optional attribute, that is class, which is given some information, right? Likewise, if I look for more elements, like I look for this text box, it will have the tag name, mandatory attribute, and then it is having optional attribute name, id and class. They are having three of them. Okay, now why are these three only the main ones? So the id and name, these are such the attributes which are, if once they are assigned to some variable on a page, they are not going to be shared with another element. They will be unique on the page. So if you have to identify a single element on the whole web page and that element has the optional attributes id or name, you can simply go and extract it. Okay, but if we talk about the class attribute, now class is basically an attribute which is responsible for the look and feel of the object. of the element, that how the object is going to look like, how much padding is going to be above and lower, the borders are going to be circular or something like that, how it's going to look on the page. So class is going to be responsible for that. So just because of this reason, the class can be shared by different elements on the page. It's not the unique attribute. Some elements may have the same look and feel. So the class may be shared by those elements. So if you have to extract multiple elements, you can use the class attribute. For just a unique element, ID and name. Okay? Any questions, any doubts over here? Am I audible to you now? Okay, I'll just will repeat what I said in the last 30 to 40 seconds. I just said that if some element has the ID or name optional attribute, you can uniquely identify it. But when you talk about the class attribute, the class attribute can be shared by multiple elements on the same page, because class is such an attribute which is responsible for the look and feel of the element on the page, right? So if you have to extract multiple objects, then you can use class attribute, otherwise you can use ID or name attribute. Okay, clear? Any questions, any doubts over here? ID and name for unique element. If you have to identify only one element on the page uniquely, then ID and name are going to help you. If you are going to extract multiple elements, like multiple text boxes are there and they are having the same class attribute being shared, you can use the class attribute. You can say find elements by class name, and it will give you all the elements which are using that attribute. Okay. So this is something about the object identification. How to use it using the Selenium commands, how to extract them using the Selenium commands, that we'll see in the next class, because that will be a little hectic, right? So that is not what I'm going to start today. We'll see it tomorrow, that how to use these ID, name and class attributes and work with them. Okay, till the time you just practice on the PyTest, the parameterizing, the assert keyword and rest of the things, and try to just look for different pages if you get some time, and see how actually the elements are distributed. ID, name, class, which attribute is having all of them, which are not having all of them. Right. Likewise, just try to visit more of the pages. Okay.